Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So, this week there's been a very interesting development here in Baltimore. The Baltimore state's attorney, Marilyn Mosby, has been indicted by the federal government. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the charges, talk about her response to the charges, and then provide my analysis or my opinion about the situation. So, first, let me share this article with you all. Please bear with me a second. So, hopefully, you all can see this. So, this is the article from the Baltimore Sun. And in this article, it says that a federal grand jury has indicted Baltimore's top prosecutor, Marilyn Mosby, on charges of perjury and making false statements with a series of financial transactions that helped her buy a condo in Florida. It's basically a case where she's being charged of falsely claiming to have suffered from financial hardship from the coronavirus to obtain an early withdrawal from her retirement savings to purchase these homes. It goes on to say that she lied on the mortgage loan application by hiding outstanding federal tax debt. And they also accuse her of entering an agreement to rent out the home that she bought near Disney World. And it was purchased with a promise not to rent the property in order to obtain a lower interest rate, but she went ahead and rented the property anyway. And it goes on to talk about how she was under investigation before. It goes on to provide more allegations. It says the indictment alleges that Marilyn Mosby sought a $40,000 withdrawal from her city retirement account, um, citing financial hardship that she experienced due to the pandemic. And the thing that makes this so odd is the fact that she had an increase in her wages by $10,000 at the time, increasing her salary to $248,000. And that makes the allegations of having a financial hardship like hard to believe. Like, how are you talking about a financial hardship when you're making close to $250,000 a year? And then this goes on to say that Mosby had not experienced adverse financial consequences stemming from the coronavirus as a result of being quarantined, furloughed, or reduced work hours, or due to a lack of child care, or other things that are listed here. And it says that those things are prerequisites or requirements for somebody to obtain such a loan. And she basically attested under oath, that she had a reason to obtain these loans, under hardship. And the fact of the matter is that she did not, like according to this complaint that's been filed. And basically she's challenging the charges, through her attorney. She said that she's fighting these charges, etc. And there's another story that I want to show you as well. And this goes into a little bit more detail about this. It goes on to say that prosecutors say in purchasing that property, she lied about whether she had any federal tax debts when IRS had issued a lien on her Baltimore property. And then it also says that she falsely claimed that the property was a second home, which lowered the interest rate. And she had already lined up a management company to operate it as a short-term rental. Um, and this goes on to say that she purchased an 8-bedroom home, and it provides all the details. And the house was for $545,000. And here's a copy of the complaint. What I'll do is I'll post a link to this article in the description box so that you all can read it for yourself if you choose to. The next thing is, this article that talks about her response. She had a press conference, and I think it was yesterday that she had this press conference. And during the press conference, she said, "I'm innocent of the charges that have been levied against me, and I intend to fight with every ounce in my being." So she's going to fight these charges. And basically, she said ever since, she announced charges against the 6 officers who played a role in the killing of Freddie Gray, she's been a target. She said that she's had a target on her back. She said, "I've used my power and my discretion to do things that a lot of people in this country just don't like." And she's basically suggesting that she's a target of these investigations because of her action with respect to the Freddie Gray matter. And that's a very important case. You all, if you're familiar with my videos, you know that I did videos talking about the Freddie Gray case. I did videos commending her for bringing charges against against the officers who were responsible for the death of Freddie Gray. I thought that was bold and courageous on her part to take action against those officers, even though she did not prevail in those criminal cases against those officers. I thought it was courageous. I thought it was the right thing to do, and I still commend her for doing so. But we'll get into this claim about being a target for pressing charges against Freddie Gray's killers later. So there's also another article from the Baltimore Brew, and I want to pull that up. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen while I look for that. So if you all can bear with me a second, I'm going to pull up that article and talk a little bit about it. So just bear with me a minute. Shout out to everyone in the chat. I appreciate you all tuning in. Just bear with me a second. Just bear with me a second, y'all. I saw this great article, interesting article posted in the Baltimore Brew that somebody had shared. Hold on one second. Yeah, so this particular article, and I'm going to share it in a second so you all can see it. But, as someone points out on the Baltimore City voters page on Facebook, this person points out that Marilyn Mosby's attorney has been telling the New York Times and other media that the prosecutors are wrong, that his client did experience COVID hardship with her private travel companies. So while she's the state's attorney, she has these private travel companies. But then, this person points out how Mosby previously said that those companies had no clients or revenue and weren't operational. So the question is, how could they experience some hardship due to COVID when they weren't even operational when they had no clients, according to Mosby herself. Um, so these are some serious questions. And there's this article. Let me share my screen so that you all can see it. I'll post this in the description box after this video uploads. So let me share the screen real quick so you all can see it. So here's the article from the Baltimore Brew, and it raises several questions, and some of them are, I already mentioned some of the questions. So again, it talks about how this attorney is saying that her travel businesses were affected by COVID, but then again, this article points out how back in July 2020, those her spokesman or spokesperson said that those businesses were not operational and she would not start them until she was out of public office. It goes on, the spokesperson went on to say this: there are no clients and she has not received a single cent in revenue. And then, it goes on to say that Mosby instructed this. She said, I asked you to verify that I have not taken a single client from these companies or for these companies, nor have I taken in any money. So if that's the case, how are you experiencing some financial hardships because of COVID? So that's one of the questions that this particular article raises. And I'm not going to go into much detail about the article, but I will post links to all of these articles in the description box so that you all can read them and judge them for yourself and evaluate the situation for yourself. Shout out to Ghost Rider and shout out to Bonafide. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, so this is what I have to say about this. I think that this is an unfortunate situation. And I'm not going to prejudge the case at all. I'm not going to say that she's guilty. Under the law, people are presumed innocent until they're proven guilty. So, I'm going to abide by that. I'm not going to make a judgment and assume that she's guilty or not. I'm not going to say that she's guilty. And but I'm also not going to be one of these people that jump on a bandwagon and assume that she's some kind of helpless victim who's being wrongfully targeted and all that kind of stuff. Let's see where the evidence goes. She has been indicted. There will more likely than not be a trial, and either there's going to be a verdict or there's going to be some kind of plea arrangement. I'll reserve judgment until that time. But I'll say this, just the allegations alone are very disappointing, especially here coming from Baltimore. Given the fact that we've had all these situations involving corruption here in Baltimore, we've had two mayors indicted on, for various charges and convicted of charges. And we've had corrupt delegates and senators here, from Baltimore and from other parts of Maryland. And it's very disappointing to see this. It's very disappointing to see this pattern. And here we have the top prosecutor being charged, with federal crimes and stuff like that. And it's very disappointing, man. It's like it sends a bad message, especially in terms of tearing down the image of Black women, because this will be this will be the fourth prominent Black woman politician from the Baltimore area who's been indicted in the past few years. You've had two African-American women mayors indicted. You had a delegate, if I'm not mistaken, and I can't recall her name off the top of my head, but you had this delegate who was recently indicted and charged and stuff. And now you have Marilyn Mosby. So it's just not a good look for the city. So that's the first thing. This is not good for the city. It sends a bad message. And the other thing is this, like, if these charges are actually true, obviously she should resign. And that's for, some basic reasons. Like, number one, dealing with these charges is distracting her from fulfilling her duties as the state's attorney in Baltimore at a time when Baltimore is experiencing, a rise in crime, at a time when Baltimore is plagued by a cycle of violence. The last thing we need is for our state's attorney to be preoccupied with her own legal troubles. So that's one thing that needs to be taken into consideration. And she should seriously consider this, whether or not it's good for her to remain in that position while she's being, facing these federal charges. Because how can she focus on her job when she has to focus on defending herself from these federal charges? So that's one thing that needs to be taken into account. The other thing is this, like, how can we trust somebody to enforce the law? This is if the charges are true. If the charges are true, how can we trust somebody to enforce the law when they are violating the law that they have been sworn to enforce? So that makes it very hard for for the city and for her. Like, you can't be in a position where you're supposed to enforce the law when you are violating the law. And again, this comes at a time when Baltimore is plagued by a lot of crime, unfortunately. And it comes at a time when too many of these criminal matters are being dismissed. Too many of these violent crimes are being dismissed. And when I get a chance, I'll post a link to an article that I saw on one of the local Baltimore news websites, talking about the conviction rates and the large numbers of criminal dismissals. So these are very serious matters, and it's a shame, that this situation is going on. And one thing I want to warn people about is, like, this effort to try to paint her as some kind of martyr and to play out the race card and stuff like that. Let's just look at the facts. Let's see where the facts point us, instead of buying into these distractions, and being governed by our emotions. Nobody is entitled to a public office. That's something that people have to earn. They are supposed to be public servants. They are not royalty, where people have to show blind allegiance to them. So, I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt. I'm not going to make any kind of judgments right now, but I still think that it may be worth considering resigning, just in light of the fact that it may be a distraction from her carrying out her full duties, even if she were to temporarily take a leave of absence or something like that. If that's possible, that's something that should be considered. But other than that, I'm not going to say that she's guilty, but I'm not going to be one of these people defending her blindly, like I see so many people doing, buying into, like, this racial narrative, making it appear as if she's some helpless Black victim of a white racist federal establishment or something like that. If the facts don't point to that, if there's no concrete evidence of that, then I'm not buying into that narrative. And I'm not going to be one of these people cheerleading for her, blindly cheerleading for her. And I could say much more, but at this point, I'm not going to say more. And again, like, I commend her decision to indict those officers who were linked to the death of Freddie Gray, but I'm not going to use the fact that she had the courage back then to bring those charges to make me ignore facts that are in front of our faces, or to make me, overlook violations of the law. Because too often that's what happens. Like, too often we do that. Too often we're quick to forgive instead of holding our elected officials accountable. Holding them accountable, not just for, like, whether or not they adhere to the law, but in terms of them actually making a difference in communities. There are a lot of people that are complaining about, like, her policy when it comes to the drugs. And, I could go on and on about that. I did a prior video about that. about some of the measures that she's taken in terms of not prosecuting people for possession of drugs. And I don't know if that's a completely good idea. I mean, we all know about the detrimental impact of the war on drugs, but we also know about the detrimental impact that drugs have had on our communities. We know about the violence connected to the drug trade. We know about all the lives destroyed by drug addiction. We know about all the communities that have been turned into open air drug markets. They basically suck the life out of communities. So, I'm not fully on board with this idea that we should, just basically legalize drugs and allow the problem to proliferate. I think that there has to be a balance. There has to be a just balance where you don't have a situation where there's mass incarceration for people being addicted to drugs. That should be treated as a public health issue, but you also don't want a situation where you're basically opening the floodgates and creating a situation where drug markets thrive and lives are destroyed. So, yeah, so those are a couple of my thoughts, and I'm going to check out your comments before I close out. Again, I want to thank you all for tuning in. I truly appreciate it. Yeah, so this is a good point right here. Somebody makes a point about how you do have a lot of white people that violate the law, and they're not punished to the same extent or punished equally. And that's the situation with the American criminal justice situation. We see it all the time. This society is a society of double standards, without a doubt. And I hear that point. We know about the disparities in sentencing between black people and white people in this country. We know about how even law enforcement, how they target black communities for drug enforcement, and they let other communities slide, or they're not as aggressive in their enforcement. We know about how police deal with black people compared to how they deal with white people. So you are making a valid point, but I don't think that we should use that point to basically sweep under the carpet wrongdoing by our own black elected officials. Our black elected officials owe a duty to fulfill the best of standards, to live up to high standards. They should at minimum be obeying the law. That's just basic. Given the sacrifice that our ancestors made so that we could have the right to vote, so that we could have the right to run for office and be elected and stuff like that. They didn't sacrifice so that black people could get in position and use that position to violate the law. They didn't sacrifice for that. All those brothers and sisters that were marching in Selma, facing those police dogs and those batons, getting locked up and facing the Klan, they did not sacrifice so that black people could be elected and then violate the public trust. So I hear what you're saying. I do, believe in equality under the law. Like the law should be equally enforced. All people that violate the law should be dealt with equally. They should receive equal sentences regardless of their race and stuff like that. So I hear you on that. And if black elected officials are investigated, the same should happen to white elected officials. And there are white elected officials that do get indicted. But yeah, I mean, there are serious questions about that. There should be more indictments. Like all those people that were connected, for instance, to the situation involving Catherine Pugh, the former mayor here in Baltimore. I didn't see any white people facing any criminal charges as far as I can recall. Somebody can correct me if I'm mistaken, but I didn't see any of those developers or whatever who had ties to that corruption scandal face any charges, and that's deeply problematic. That is a very important issue. But as black people, we need to be on point. We need to know that we're being targeted or we're being more scrutinized than others, and that should cause us or motivate us to live up to an even higher standard. We know about people saying that black people have to work harder to get the same results in the society. Understanding that we can't afford to be sleeping, we can't afford to be slipping, and unfortunately, this may be a situation where his sister got caught slipping. Um, so thanks for your comment. I think you made a great point. Yeah, I think overall, I think this is a good point as well, bona fide. I do think that we need to have leaders that are sincere. We need to have leaders that are dedicated. And I'm not going to say that that's not the case with her, but I just think that we need to look at results. We need to be result oriented instead of, fixated on who can get a best speech or on who's from this part of Baltimore and this and that. These little frivolous type of things. Who do we like more? Because it's like, unfortunately, these elections are not even about the issues, unfortunately. Like these elections boil down to a popularity contest. Like what person do you like? Just like they're running for a class president and not some important position. So it's just a popularity contest. And it's about who can get the most money from these developers. And that's why the process ends up the way it is. And these people, unfortunately, aren't held accountable. They're not elected based on actual results. They're elected by their cronies and their influencers that put in all this money to these campaigns and stuff like that. And that's part of the reason why so many people don't even vote in the city of Baltimore, because they see this process play out. They hear these speeches every election cycle about improving conditions in communities. But when they look at the results, it's the same results. It's the same dilapidated housing. It's the same violence. It's the same messed up schools. It's the same drug addiction and open air drug markets. So people are tired. We do need a change. And we're not going to get a change if we keep electing the same people based on personality instead of based on results. So let me see what you all are saying some more. Just bear with me a second. Yeah, our politicians do have to do better. I mean, it's like if you are, I mean, assuming that what she's saying is correct, that she became a target after the Freddie Gray case and all that kind of stuff. Like, if you know that you're a target, you should be dotting your I's and crossing your T's. I mean, this whole situation, if these allegations are true, is just an example of carelessness. Like, why would you slip up and make this kind of mistake and lie, under oath on this paperwork and stuff? And like, don't get me wrong, like, this is not like one of the worst things in the world, but it does raise serious questions about integrity, um, and just corruption. And it's just a shame that you have this cycle of corruption in this city, man. And it reminds me of, like, for instance, certain African countries where you had these corrupt, self-serving leaders who don't really give a damn about the people, and it's all about themselves. Yeah, so let's see if there are any more comments. So somebody said they can hear my bias towards Marilyn Mosby, and they said personal, perhaps. I don't have anything personal against Marilyn Mosby. Like, I haven't had any personal dealings with her. The only interaction that I had with her is I saw her at a convention. I took a quick photo with her, and that's it. Like, I haven't had any interactions with her, so it's nothing personal here. And it's like, why do people always try to like discredit the person making the statements or making the arguments? discredit them personally instead of dealing with what's being raised. Like instead of actually dealing with the allegations that are raised in this particular complaint. Like people want to say, oh, you're biased. So that's a way of basically writing somebody's opinion off, canceling what they have to say about a particular issue. Yeah, I hear you, Renaissance man. Yeah, so I don't want to hold y'all that long. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Please rate, comment, subscribe, like the video, share the video, and hit that notification bell so that you'll know when I post new content on here. Peace and blessings. Have a great day.